Imagine this scenario. You are, you're just absolutely exhausted. I mean, it has been a brutally long week.
Oh, the kind where every single day just feels like an uphill battle, right?
Exactly. And you finally made it to Friday night. You are in your most comfortable sweatpants. You've got your favorite takeout sitting right there on the coffee table.
You are totally ready to just shut the world out.
Yeah, you're just about to hit play on that movie you've been waiting all week to watch. You take this deep, centering breath, feeling the crushing weight of the week finally start to lift off your shoulders. And then your phone buzzes.
Oh, no. The dreaded Friday night screen elimination. I mean, it changes the entire atmosphere of the room in a millisecond.
It really does. Your stomach drops before you even read the screen. You glance over, and it's a text from an acquaintance, not, a best friend in a crisis, just someone you know well enough.
Right, like a casual coworker or a neighbor.
Exactly. And they are asking for a massive, time-consuming favor for Saturday morning. Maybe they need help moving a ridiculously heavy couch, or they want you to review a massive 50-page document for their side hustle by Monday.
Or they need you to drive an hour out of your way to pick up something they bought online.
Yes. And before your conscious brain can even process the sheer dread washing over you, before you can even think about how tired your bones feel, your fingers are already moving. You type, sure, no problem, happy to help, and you hit send.
And instantly, the biological reaction hits. The regret, the resentment, that sudden spike in your heart rate.
And your weekend is entirely ruined. Later, you're resentful, you're physically exhausted, and you are completely skipping your own carefully laid plans just to help them.
It's a classic trap.
It is. So why do we do this? To figure out this maddening cycle, we are spending our time today exploring two incredible anonymous clinical guides focused on personal development and psychological flexibility.
And these texts reveal something genuinely terrifying about that Friday night text message, actually.
They really do, because that automatic, sure, no problem, isn't just a quirky personality trait or like a sign that you are a delightfully helpful person. It is actually a raw survival instinct.
Right. We are constantly sacrificing our own peace and our own time to manage other people's feelings, all while running as fast as we can from our own internal discomfort.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it is a universal paradox that we see across all demographics. We betray ourselves to keep the peace with others, but in doing so, we wage a silent, invisible war inside our own minds.
Yeah, and what we really need to understand is the evolutionary machinery behind this behavior. We aren't just looking at the surface level action of saying yes when we mean no. We have to look at the nervous system.
The actual biology of it.
Exactly. I want you, the listener, to reframe those moments of caving in. Those aren't moral failings. They aren't signs of weakness. Your brain is actively trying to protect you from a perceived threat. It is just using incredibly outdated biological software to do it.
So let's start right there with the internal struggle. I mean, the actual mechanics of what is happening in our brains when that text message comes through.
Well, the source material outlines that the human brain is hardwired to grasp onto positive experiences with a death grip and aggressively, desperately push away negative ones.
Right. And the texts refer to this mechanism as experiential avoidance.
Yes, experiential avoidance. It's the endless, exhausting loop of trying to control, suppress, or completely ignore uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. We are talking about internal experiences like anxiety, shame, guilt, or the fear of rejection.
Which feels awful, so obviously we want to get away from it.
Of course. And to understand this, we have to look back at our evolutionary history. Moving away from pain is what kept our ancestors alive on the savannah.
Like a physical reflex.
Exactly. If you touch a burning piece of wood, the intense physical pain tells you to pull your hand back immediately. That is physical avoidance, and it works perfectly. It prevents tissue damage.
Makes total sense.
But human beings developed this massive, complex cerebral cortex, and our brains began to apply that exact same physical survival mechanism to our internal psychological world.
So the brain essentially treats a feeling of guilt the exact same way it treats a hot stove.
In a very real neurological sense, yes. The brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, doesn't easily differentiate between the physical threat of a predator and the psychological threat of social rejection.
Wow, so our bodies are reacting like we're being chased by a tiger just because we might upset an acquaintance.
Exactly. For early humans, social rejection meant being kicked out of the tribe, which literally meant death by starvation or exposure.
Right, you couldn't survive alone.
So when you think about disappointing that person on a Friday night, your brain interprets the potential social friction as a life or death threat. It sounds dramatic, but that is how the nervous system responds. Experiential avoidance is your brain's attempt to pull your hand off the hot stove of negative emotion.
But, and this is the crazy part, pulling your hand off a stove actually stops the burn. Trying to pull your mind away from its own thoughts seems biologically impossible.
Because it is impossible. And the psychological texts highlight a classic thought experiment to demonstrate why this internal avoidance backfires so spectacularly. It's known as the white bear experiment.
Oh, I love this one. Walk us through it.
Okay, so if I instruct you right now for the next 30 seconds, you can think about whatever you want in the entire world, but you absolutely must not think of a white bear. What is happening in your mind?
It's immediate. I mean, I am picturing a massive, fluffy polar bear walking through the snow. Even if I try to think about a red car, there is a white bear driving it.
Right. The very effort required to monitor your thoughts to ensure you aren't thinking about the bear requires you to keep the concept of the bear active in your working memory.
That is so frustrating.
It is. And we do this exact same thing with our emotions. We
Yeah.
tell ourselves, don't feel anxious about this presentation. Don't feel guilty about taking a day off. Don't be sad about that breakup.
And by doing that, we're just creating more white bears.
Exactly. By focusing all our cognitive energy on suppressing those feelings, we amplify them, we feed them. They become the white bear, looming larger and larger in our consciousness.
The sources provide a really compelling anonymous case study that illustrates this amplification perfectly.
Oh, the young professional.
Yes, so there's this young professional who experiences intense, almost crippling anxiety in group settings at her workplace.
Right, that sickening, heart-racing, sweaty palm feeling.
Exactly. And to avoid that feeling, she begins to alter her behavior. She starts turning down invitations to optional meetings. She eats lunch alone at her desk every single day.
She's pulling her hand away from the stove.
Yep. She avoids joining cross-departmental projects where she'd have to collaborate with new people. She completely skips the office holiday parties.
So we have to evaluate the workability of that behavior from her brain's perspective. Does her strategy work?
I mean, in the extremely short term, the answer is yes, right?
Yes. The immediate result of turning down the lunch invitation is a massive wave of relief. The anxiety spikes when a coworker walks up to her desk and asks her to join the group. Her threat system activates.
If she says, "Oh, I have too much work, I can't make it."
And boom, the anxiety plummets. Her nervous system registers that as a massive victory. The control strategy worked. The threat was neutralized.
But the long-term result is entirely devastating. Over months and years, she starts to feel completely isolated.
She feels defective, like she is sitting on the sidelines watching everyone else build connections and advance their careers.
And the most tragic part is that the anxiety itself doesn't actually go away. The next time an invitation comes, the anxiety is significantly stronger.
Because she has essentially trained her brain, reinforced the neural pathways to believe that group settings are incredibly dangerous and must be avoided at all costs.
Wow. So she is trapped in this vicious cycle of experiential avoidance. She is sacrificing a rich, meaningful, connected life just to avoid the temporary biochemical discomfort of anxiety.
She is prioritizing feeling good, or rather not feeling bad in the current moment, over living well in the overarching narrative of her life.
The clinical texts use a metaphor here that really stuck with me. Trying to suppress these emotions is like trying to hold a massive, fully inflated beach ball underwater.
Oh, that is a fantastic visual.
Isn't it? You can do it for a little while, you can use all your upper body strengths, all your intense focus, and keep that ball completely submerged beneath the surface of the pool so nobody around you even knows it's there.
You look calm on the surface.
Right. But holding it down takes absolutely all of your available energy. You can't swim, you can't play Marco Polo with your friends, you can't enjoy the sunshine because both of your hands are forcefully locked in position, pushing down this buoyant object.
And eventually, inevitably, your arms get tired.
You slip, and that beach ball explodes to the surface, launching out of the water with incredible force and hitting you right in the face.
It perfectly captures the sheer exhaustion of suppression. I mean, the energy it takes to hold the emotional beach ball down is energy stolen from your capacity to participate in your own life.
And when it hits you in the face.
When that ball finally breaches the surface, which it always does, it manifests as a panic attack, a sudden outburst of rage at a loved one over something trivial, or a profound depressive crash.
So if we look around at our daily habits, I have to wonder if almost everything we do in modern society is just an elaborate form of beach ball pushing.
I mean, we have built an entire culture around it, honestly.
We really have.
Modern society provides endless, highly sophisticated, and socially rewarded tools for experiential avoidance. Consider the phenomenon of mindless scrolling on a smartphone for 3 hours every evening. What is the individual actually avoiding?
Usually it is the quiet, creeping loneliness or the existential dread that tends to surface when the brain isn't actively stimulated.
Exactly. Overworking is another massively rewarded avoidance strategy. Being the employee who stays at the office until 9 p.m. every single night might look like incredible dedication to the company, but clinically, it is very often an avoidance strategy.
It keeps the person from facing a failing silent marriage at home, or it masks an underlying persistent sense of inadequacy.
We use alcohol, we use constant overscheduling, we overprepare for tasks, we even use chronic complaining to friends as a way to avoid actually sitting with the raw feeling of sadness or fear.
These behaviors are intended as solutions to our discomfort, but they end up becoming the primary problems that destroy our quality of life.
Right.
Which brings up a huge connection, because if we're spending the vast majority of our cognitive and physical energy avoiding our own internal discomfort, it makes perfect biological sense that we would do absolutely anything to avoid the discomfort of upsetting someone else.
Because upsetting someone else, see their face fall, hearing the disappointment in their voice, triggers our own internal guilt.
It triggers that savanna brain fear of exile. Which brings us to the next massive concept in the source material. How this internal avoidance dictates the external architecture of our lives, or, for most of us, the complete lack of external architecture.
The transition from the internal psychological world to the external interpersonal world is completely seamless. We don't want to feel the internal pain of guilt or the fear of conflict. Therefore, we automatically say yes to external demands, no matter how unreasonable, to avoid triggering those internal landmines.
We let people walk all over us because standing up for ourselves would require us to feel the very emotions we have spent our entire lives trying to hold underwater.
And the texts introduce this fascinating concept of the unconscious blueprint to explain why.
Yes, the blueprint. We all have an internal, invisible blueprint that dictates our external limits. It determines how much time and energy we let people take from us, how we allow people to speak to us, and what kind of treatment we'd accept as normal.
But the wild part is that this blueprint isn't something we consciously drafted as rational adults. We didn't sit down at age 25 and sketch out how we want to be treated.
No, this blueprint was drawn up for us in early childhood. It is based entirely on our family dynamics, the cultural norms of our upbringing, and all those unspoken, invisible rules we absorbed when we were incredibly young and totally dependent on our caregivers.
Which brings up a rather uncomfortable realization. Why are we letting the frightened 5-year-old or the anxious 8-year-old version of ourselves dictate our professional careers and adult romantic relationships today?
It's honestly baffling when you put it like that.
But that is effectively what is happening when we operate on an outdated childhood blueprint. The nervous system learned a set of rules for survival back then, and it is still blindly applying them now, even though the context has completely changed.
To bring this childhood blueprint concept out of the theoretical and into reality, the clinical texts share a highly relatable and honestly somewhat tragic story.
The bridesmaid story.
Yes, the woman who had been a bridesmaid 8 different times. 8 times.
That is a lot of weddings.
It is. And she was in her early 20s, completely broke, living in an expensive city, literally scraping together coins to afford the subway to get to work. And yet, she went into serious high-interest credit card debt, buying these hideous, expensive bridesmaid dresses.
She's paying for bachelorette party flights and buying wedding gifts for people she barely even liked.
We were talking about women she used to wait tables with years ago, or peripheral college acquaintances.
From a purely rational economic perspective, this behavior makes absolutely zero sense. Why would a functional adult bankrupt themselves for a peripheral acquaintance?
Well, the text explains that the sheer physiological terror of displeasing the bride and the overwhelming fear of not being perceived by her peer group as a nice, supportive person completely overrode her financial reality.
To decline the invitation, to look the bride in the eye and say, "I am so happy for you, but I cannot afford to be in your wedding," would mean facing the potential anger or judgment of the bride.
But more importantly, it would mean facing her own internal catastrophic feeling of being a bad, selfish person. So she swiped the credit card.
She essentially financed her way out of momentary emotional discomfort at 19% APR.
Exactly. Let's dissect the origin of that specific childhood blueprint because it is incredibly common.
Think about a household where open communication about difficult feelings is implicitly forbidden. Perhaps negative emotions, especially anger or frustration, are not tolerated by the parents.
Right.
A child growing up in that environment becomes highly, almost supernaturally, attuned to reading the emotional weather of the room. The child's nervous system learns to detect the slightest change in the pitch of their father's booming voice, or they notice the subtle, silent tension in their mother's jaw when she washes the dishes.
The child realizes very quickly and non-verbally that keeping the peace is the only way to ensure their own emotional or physical safety.
They learn that their own stability depends entirely on managing and regulating the emotions of the giant, powerful adults around them.
That is exactly the mechanism. The child's internal logic becomes, if I am perfectly compliant, if I am always cheerful, if I can anticipate what you need before you even realize you need it, then you won't get angry, the house will stay quiet, and I will be safe.
And that childhood blueprint wires itself deeply into the brain. It carries directly over into adulthood, creating highly functional, severely codependent people pleasers.
These are the people who are excellent at their jobs, they are the rock of their friend group, but they are absolutely exhausted, running on empty, and silently harboring deep resentment.
Their entire adult operating system is still based on a child's strategy for avoiding the anxiety of someone else's displeasure.
So if our personal limits are a house, this blueprint dictates how the house is built. Some people seem to have giant, impenetrable stone fortresses with a moat and barbed wire nobody gets in.
And some of us just have a nice little welcome mat, a completely open door, and a sign that says, please come in and take whatever you need.
Exactly. The clinical texts break down the architecture of these limits into 5 distinct categories. And I want to spend significant time exploring these because reading through them was a massive light bulb moment for me. We need to self-diagnose where our house is missing a wall.
It is a crucial exercise. Because human beings are complex, you might be incredibly strong and well-defended in one area of your life, but completely exposed and vulnerable in another.
Okay, so the texts identify 5 categories: physical, sexual, material, mental, and emotional. Let's start with the first one, physical limits. This seems straightforward, but I imagine it goes far beyond just physical safety.
It does. Physical limits dictate the parameters of your personal space and your physical body. It answers questions like, who is allowed to touch you? What kind of touch is acceptable? How close do you want people to stand to you in a conversation?
Are you comfortable with a handshake, or do you prefer no contact?
Exactly. A blatant violation of a physical limit is obvious, like physical assault.
Yeah.
But the subtle, everyday violations are what drain people.
Like what?
It is the overly familiar coworker who always comes up behind you and rubs your shoulders while you are typing. It is the family member who insists on a tight, lingering hug at every gathering, even when you stiffen up and offer a quick pat on the back.
Or the relative who walks right up and touches a pregnant woman's stomach without asking. Or even someone just walking into your closed bedroom or your home office without knocking. It's the assumption of access to your physical space.
Precisely. The second category is sexual limits. This is about ensuring that all physical intimacy happens strictly on your own terms, rooted in mutual, enthusiastic consent.
Right?
It dictates what level of sexual touch is acceptable, where it happens, when it happens, and with whom. This limit protects your bodily autonomy in the most vulnerable contexts.
And a violation here isn't just the extreme cases we think of. It can be pressure, right?
Yes, coercion is a massive violation. Unwanted, sexually charged comments about your body in the workplace. A partner who pouts, uses guilt trips, or acts emotionally withdrawn to pressure you into physical intimacy when you have clearly stated you are tired or not in the mood. That is a direct assault on a sexual limit.
The third category is the one that really tripped me up. Material limits. I always conceptualized boundaries as these purely emotional, invisible force fields. I never really thought about my stuff.
Material limits are incredibly important because our possessions often represent our time and our labor. This category dictates who has access to your physical resources, who gets to borrow your car, are you willing to lend your favorite clothes, how do you handle your money?
Are there specific rooms in your house that are off limits to guests? Do you require people to take their shoes off to protect your floors?
Exactly.
And how does a childhood blueprint mess this up?
Imagine a child who grew up in a chaotic home where nothing belonged to them. Siblings constantly took their toys, parents freely searched their room without cause.
So they didn't have a safe space.
Right. That child might grow up to have incredibly porous material limits. They become the adult who lets a friend borrow a large sum of money, knowing full well the friend has a terrible track record and will never pay it back.
Oh, wow.
Or they are the roommate who buys all the expensive groceries and quietly seethes while everyone else eats them, terrified to bring it up because asking for compensation feels like initiating a massive conflict.
They are prioritizing the illusion of peace over their own material stability. That leads right into the fourth category, mental limits. This is about your fundamental right to your own thoughts, your own values, and your own opinions.
A healthy mental limit means you have a solid sense of your own intellectual identity. You can sit at a dinner table, listen to someone else vehemently express a political or philosophical perspective that completely contradicts your own, and you do not feel personally threatened.
You can engage with their ideas or ignore them, but you hold firm to your own core beliefs without needing to instantly conform.
Right. A violation of a mental limit feels very specific. It's not just someone disagreeing with you, it's someone aggressively belittling your beliefs, telling you that your opinions are stupid or invalid.
It is the essence of gaslighting.
It is a family member or a partner who refuses to take no for an answer when you've stated your stance on an issue, and they badger you relentlessly until you finally just agree with them to make the interrogation stop.
When your mental limits are porous, you constantly doubt your own reality. You adopt the opinions of the strongest personality in the room just to blend in.
And the final category, which is arguably where the vast majority of human chaos happens, is emotional limits.
This one is huge.
Emotional limits are the most complex to navigate. A healthy emotional limit means understanding deep in your bones a fundamental truth. You are solely responsible for your own feelings, and other adults are solely responsible for theirs.
It means you do not absorb other people's moods like a dry sponge dropped in water. This is so difficult for highly empathetic people.
Yes, the concept of differentiation comes to mind. Differentiation is the psychological goal here.
What does that look like in practice?
If your partner comes home from work in a terrible, storming mood because they had a nightmare commute in traffic, a healthy emotional limit allows you to be empathetic. You can say, "I am so sorry traffic was awful. That sounds incredibly frustrating."
But you don't instantly become enraged or deeply depressed yourself.
Exactly. Your internal weather remains stable, even though their weather is stormy. Most importantly, you don't take the blame for their bad day, and you don't frantically run around trying to fix their mood.
An emotional limit violation is someone literally telling you how you should feel. You shouldn't be sad about that, get over it.
Or, conversely, it is someone emotionally dumping all their unmanaged trauma and anxiety onto you, treating you like an unpaid therapist without your consent.
The porous emotional limit is the hallmark of the codependent blueprint. You believe that if someone else is unhappy, it is your job to fix it, and you cannot be happy until they are.
It's exhausting.
Let's look at the intersection of these limits. What happens when we have a porous state in one category but a rigid state in another? Because I feel like almost nobody is entirely one or the other.
Oh, definitely not.
For example, I have a colleague who is incredibly rigid with their money. Their material limits are an absolute fortress. They have detailed spreadsheets, they never lend a dime, they will split a restaurant check down to the exact penny.
Okay, so strong material limits.
But they are entirely porous with their emotional energy. They will stay on the phone until 2 a.m. listening to a highly toxic, dramatic friend complain about the same problems for the 100th time, completely draining themselves before a big workday.
That is a very common, fascinating profile. And again, we trace it back to the blueprint. Perhaps in their childhood, financial resources were incredibly scarce or volatile.
So they built a wall.
Exactly. So they developed a massive, rigid wall to protect material resources because money equaled survival. But emotionally, perhaps they were parentified. They were required to be the emotional caretaker for a struggling, unpredictable parent.
So their emotional door was permanently wedged open. They learned that their value comes from being an emotional dumping ground.
Right. You can see the exact reverse, too. Someone might have incredibly rigid emotional walls. They never show vulnerability. They deflect any deep questions with humor. They isolate themselves the moment a relationship gets serious. But they have completely porous material limits.
They are always buying dinner for the whole group, always giving lavish gifts, essentially trying to buy connection because they are terrified of actual emotional intimacy.
It creates a very complex internal ecosystem. But the clinical texts make a profound pivot here. They argue that the most crucial limit isn't actually the external one.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it is not the wall keeping other people out. The most important limit is the one managing yourself. If you do not have that internal structure, none of the external rules you try to set with other people will hold up under pressure.
That brings us perfectly to the concept of internal boundaries. If external limits tell the rest of the world how they are allowed to treat you, your internal limits dictate how you treat yourself.
Internal limits are the absolute foundation of self-mastery. Without them, You are in a constant state of self-betrayal.
I want to paint the picture of the VIP area metaphor from the texts because it clarifies this abstract concept so beautifully.
Go for it.
Imagine your life, your emotional energy, your focus, and your physical time as an exclusive, high-end VIP lounge at an upscale club. It is luxurious, it is safe, it is peaceful, and it is highly sought after.
Sounds great.
At the door to this VIP lounge, there must be a velvet rope. And you, the listener, are the bouncer.
The fundamental rule of the VIP lounge is that not everyone is entitled to get past that rope. Access is a privilege, not a right.
But because of our experiential avoidance and our childhood blueprints, we have this terrible habit of letting absolutely anyone wander into our VIP area.
The coworker who complains incessantly and drains the life out of the room, the family member who constantly criticizes your life choices, the ex-partner who texts you at midnight looking for attention.
And we don't just let them in. The problem is that we, the bouncer, actually unhook the velvet rope, escort them inside, and then we actively help them trash our own lounge. We pour them a drink while they ruin the upholstery, all because we are terrified they might leave a bad review of the club if we turn them away.
That analogy captures the tragic absurdity of it. Assisting in the trashing of your own lounge is the ultimate symptom of poor internal limits. Psychologically, we call this self-abandonment.
Self-abandonment occurs in the microscopic moments when you make a firm promise to yourself and then you deliberately break it to accommodate someone else or to avoid momentary internal discomfort.
Exactly.
What does that broken inner promise look like in a normal Tuesday afternoon scenario?
Let's say you make a commitment to your health. You promise yourself, I am not going to drink alcohol at this networking event tonight because I have a massive presentation tomorrow morning and I need my brain to be sharp. You have established a clear internal limit.
But then you arrive at the event and a very persistent, loud colleague hands you a drink and says, "Come on, don't be boring, we're celebrating."
Your internal limit is instantly tested. If your internal architecture is weak, your brain calculates the threat. You prioritize avoiding the awkward conflict with your colleague. You avoid the momentary sting of their potential judgment over your own long-term well-being and professional success.
You take the drink, you abandon yourself, the bouncer just let a destructive element pass the rope.
Or a scenario that happens to so many parents or caregivers. You finally, after weeks of burnout, carve out 1 hour on a Saturday morning to go to a fitness class or just take a walk alone.
You are literally lacing up your shoes.
And your mother calls, demanding you come over right now to help her fix a minor issue with her television that could easily wait until Monday.
If you untie your shoes, sigh, and drive over to her house, you have failed to delay immediate gratification.
And we must be clear about how the brain works here. The gratification isn't pleasure. You aren't happy to be fixing the TV. The gratification is the instant chemical relief of avoiding a conflict with your mother.
You trade your long-term benefit, your physical health and mental sanity, for the short-term illusion of keeping the peace.
Right.
I have to pause here because everything we are discussing runs completely counter to the messages we receive from society. Society, culture, movies, often our family, everything tells us that putting ourselves first is the definition of selfishness.
It's deeply ingrained.
We are deeply conditioned to believe that a good moral person is someone who constantly sacrifices themselves for the benefit of others. So how do we distinguish between having a healthy, firm velvet rope and just being an isolated, cold, unhelpful person who refuses to be there for their community?
It is a critical distinction, and it is the #1 psychological barrier people face when doing this work. The fear of being labeled selfish is the ultimate weapon of experiential avoidance.
So how do we reframe that?
Well, the clinical research reveals a fascinating paradox. Having healthy, rigorous internal limits actually drastically increases your capacity for genuine generosity.
How does saying no make you more generous? That seems completely contradictory.
Let's examine the mechanics of a forced yes. Think about the last time you agreed to do a massive favor when every cell in your body wanted to say no. What kind of energy did you bring to that interaction?
Probably not great energy.
Were you joyful? Were you deeply present and loving? Almost certainly not. You were likely bitter, silently resentful, and exhausted. You were offering the other person a counterfeit, hollow version of yourself.
You were helping them, but you were secretly tallying a debt in your head.
Exactly. You were physically there helping them move the couch,
Yeah.
but mentally you were angry at them for asking.
Yeah, I've definitely been there.
Now, consider the alternative. When you maintain a strong velvet rope, you protect your energy. You aren't chronically burned out, So when a friend truly needs you in a crisis and you consult your internal limits and choose to say yes, that yes possesses massive power.
Because it's real.
It is backed by real, surplus energy and an authentic desire to help. It protects your integrity. You are no longer helping them out of fear, obligation, or a desperate need to be liked. You are helping them out of genuine care.
A person with no limits gives everything until they collapse into resentment. A person with strong internal limits gives from a place of abundance.
Exactly. Giving from a place of abundance versus giving until you collapse. That completely dismantles the selfish argument. When you protect the lounge, you actually have a beautiful space to host the people who truly matter.
Wow. Okay, so we have thoroughly mapped out the problem. We understand that we are running away from internal pain, furiously holding beach balls underwater.
We recognize that we are relying on outdated childhood nervous system blueprints that dictate we must keep the peace at all costs.
And we see how we let absolutely anyone past our velvet rope because we're terrified of the selfish label. So how do we systematically fix this without our entire social lives falling apart? Changing the fundamental rules of engagement with everyone around us sounds like a recipe for sheer panic.
It does induce panic, which is precisely why the source material introduces a massive paradigm shift in how we operate. To stop avoiding, we must embrace the psychological concept of willingness.
Willingness. It sounds passive, but I know it's not.
It is incredibly active. We must define this carefully to avoid misunderstanding. Willingness is absolutely not about wanting pain. Nobody in their right mind wants to feel anxious or guilty or rejected. Masochism is not the goal.
Right.
Willingness is the intentional act of making space for difficult emotions. It is allowing them to exist within your physical body and your mind without fighting them, if doing so serves a higher valued purpose in your life.
To make this abstract concept deeply tangible, I want to walk you, the listener, through a physical exercise detailed in the text. It's called the two hands exercise.
It's a great exercise.
If you are somewhere safe not driving, I encourage you to physically do this right now. It is incredibly illuminating. Imagine that you are holding all of your most painful, difficult thoughts and feelings in the palms of your hands.
Your deep-seated fear of rejection, your agonizing guilt about letting people down, your social anxiety, that persistent whispering thought that you simply aren't good enough.
Put all of that heavy, dark material right in your hands. Now, raise your hands up and push them away from your face as hard as you possibly can. Straight out in front of you, locking your elbows, using all your strength to keep that pain as far away from your body as possible.
Pay attention to your body in this posture. This physical stance represents our default psychological state of experiential avoidance. You are actively fighting the pain. You are holding the beach ball underwater.
Right. Now notice the consequences of this posture. Your shoulders are burning. Your arms are getting incredibly tired. It takes immense, continuous effort just to maintain the distance.
And look at your hands. They are right in your line of sight. They are completely blocking your view of the room, of the people around you, the entire world.
In this posture, you cannot embrace a loved one. You cannot pick up a tool to build something. You cannot cook a meal. Because your hands and all your energy are entirely occupied with the full-time job of pushing this pain away.
Now, we initiate the pivot, the act of willingness.
Imagine simply dropping your tension. Let your arms fall softly and let your hands rest gently in your lap, palms up.
Observe what just changed. Did the pain, the guilt, the anxiety magically disappear?
Wow.
No. It is still right there, resting in your lap. It still feels heavy. But look at the massive secondary changes. Your arms are no longer trembling with exhaustion from the fight. Your hands are suddenly free and available to interact with the world.
And your field of vision is completely unobstructed. You can see the horizon again. You have intentionally made space for the pain to exist, rather than burning your life force trying to destroy it.
That physical metaphor is staggering.
But I have to push back on the application of it. Dropping my hand sounds beautifully serene, but if I let that crushing guilt just sit in my lap, doesn't it paralyze me?
What do you mean?
Like, if I feel guilty about saying no to my boss, and I just sit there with the guilt, how do I actually move forward and build my life? Won't the emotion overwhelm me?
That is the core fear. But neurology tells us a different story. Emotions, when they are not fought or suppressed, are simply biochemical waves of data.
Just data.
Yes. When you feel guilt, your brain releases neurochemicals that cause a physical sensation, a tight chest, a sinking stomach. If you just observe that sensation without fighting it, without telling yourself a story about how awful it is, the biochemical wave typically crests and dissipates in about 90 seconds.
Only 90 seconds.
Usually, yes. The paralysis comes from the fight against the emotion, not the emotion itself. It unpacks the profound difference between the goal of feeling good versus the goal of living well.
Elaborate on that difference.
If your primary objective in life is to feel good all the time, meaning the absence of negative emotion, you will be trapped, pushing your hands out forever. You will systematically shrink your life down to a tiny, padded, safe little box where nothing challenging ever happens and nobody ever triggers you.
But if your objective is to live well,
To have a vibrant, meaningful, expansive human experience, you must accept that pain is part of the package. You must be willing to let the anxiety sit in your lap while you drive the car.
this reminds me of the mentality required to run a marathon. Nobody wakes up on a Sunday morning and says, I really want my lungs to burn for 4 hours, I want my feet to blister, and I want my leg muscles to feel like absolute lead.
Definitely not.
You do not want the physical pain, but you are willing to let your legs burn. You actively invite the pain in. You let it ride along with you mile after mile because the act of crossing that finish line is deeply personally meaningful to you. The physical pain is simply the non-negotiable price of admission for the achievement.
Precisely. Let's apply this willingness to an everyday, anxiety-inducing social situation. Suppose you need to establish a limit with a highly critical family member who constantly drains you. You need to tell them they cannot call you during your workday anymore. You do not want the extreme awkwardness of that conversation. You do not want to feel the heavy pit of guilt in your stomach when they act deeply wounded or accuse you of abandoning the family.
Oh, right, that sounds awful.
But you are willing to hold those awful churning feelings in your lap, just letting them sit there and burn. Because protecting your professional focus and your mental peace is your marathon finish line.
I am willing to feel guilty if it means I get my life back. That is a radical, life-altering shift in perspective.
It really is.
But this level of endurance requires knowing exactly what your finish line is. Because if you don't know why you are running, you are going to stop the second your emotional legs start hurting.
Yes.
This means we need to clearly distinguish between what we think we are supposed to do, like playing the role of the reliable pushover, and what we actually deeply value.
This is a critical juncture in the psychological framework.
Ah,
The sources draw a sharp, necessary distinction between goals and values. In everyday language, we often use these terms interchangeably, but confusing them leads to incredible psychological frustration.
okay, break that down for us.
A value is an ongoing, infinite direction. Think of a value like walking west. You can keep walking west for your entire life, but you will never reach a physical town called west. It is a continuous orientation that guides your steps.
And a goal.
A goal is a specific, measurable destination. It is a mountain you climb along your westward journey. Once you reach the peak, the goal is achieved, you cross it off a list, and you must find a new one.
Give me a concrete example of how this applies to our relationships and our limits.
Let's examine a romantic relationship. Being a loving, supportive partner is a value. It is a direction. You can never check that off a list and say, well, I successfully completed being a loving partner on Tuesday, so I never have to do that again. It requires continuous action.
That makes sense.
Now, doing the dirty dishes for your partner tonight because you know they are overwhelmed at work, that action is a goal. It is a specific, finite step taken in the direction of your value of being supportive.
But here's the insidious trap. The motivation changes everything. If you are doing those dishes not because you genuinely value being supportive, but simply because you want to avoid your partner's passive-aggressive sighing if the sink is full, you aren't acting on values at all.
You are acting on avoidance. You are pushing the beach ball down.
That is the exact trap. The external action washing a plate is identical, but the internal mechanics are completely different, and that distinction completely changes how the action feels in your body.
Doing the dishes based on a chosen value feels empowering. It is an act of love. Doing the dishes based on the fearful avoidance of conflict feels like resentment. It drains you.
So to act on our values, we have to find a way to unhook ourselves from that immediate, visceral fear of conflict. And the clinical texts introduce an incredible cognitive tool for this called flexible perspective taking.
Yes, we constantly trap ourselves with rigid, unyielding stories about our own identity. We walk around saying, I am just a people pleaser, or I'm not brave enough to speak up to authority figures, or I am just someone who hates conflict. We completely fuse our identity with our temporary anxious thoughts.
To break that psychological fusion, the text suggests a powerful visualization exercise, consulting your older, wiser self.
I love this one.
I want you to imagine a version of you 20 or 30 years in the future. This version of you has lived a full, rich, authentic life. They have established healthy limits, they have weathered massive storms, they have loved deeply, and they have completely stopped caring what random acquaintances think of them.
Right.
When you are faced with a terrifying moment right now, like having to say no to an unreasonable demand, you mentally step back, take a breath, and ask that older, wiser self for advice. What perspective would they offer you in this exact moment of panic?
I find this concept so deeply comforting. It's like stepping out of the intense, dramatic movie you're currently starring in.
You are in the middle of a tense scene, your heart is pounding, but suddenly you walk off the set and go sit in the director's chair behind the cameras. You look at the scene from a distance and you suddenly realize you are not the script.
You are not the temporary anxiety pulsing through your veins. You are the massive, enduring container holding the entire production.
That realization is the very essence of psychological flexibility. It is incredibly liberating to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are simply the context, the sky in which your thoughts, the clouds, happen to pass.
You can have the terrifying thought, if I say no to this extra project, my boss will think I am a terrible, lazy employee and I'll be fired. You don't have to fight that thought.
You can simply notice it, observe it like a dark cloud passing overhead, and say to yourself, I notice my brain is producing the terrible employee catastrophe story again. Thanks for the warning, brain.
And then you can proceed to say no anyway because your deepest value is maintaining your health so you don't burn out and lose your career entirely.
You strip the thought of its power simply by noticing it instead of obeying it.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered some profound theory. But a true exploration requires bringing all of this high-level psychology crashing down into the messy reality of the real world. You are standing in the hallway at work, someone asks you to do something totally unreasonable, and your heart rate spikes to 120 beats per minute.
The source material outlines a highly actionable three-step process for navigating these real-time interactions. Discover, release, and respond.
Let's break these down in agonizing detail so you, the listener, walk away with a tactical toolkit. Let's use a specific scenario. It's Friday at 4 p.m. Your disorganized boss walks over and demands you compile a massive, totally unexpected data report for Monday morning.
Yeah.
Step 1 is discover. What is happening here?
Step 1. Discover relies heavily on what the clinical text calls body wisdom. Your physical body almost always registers that a limit is being breached long before your conscious, rational brain figures it out.
In that moment with your boss, before you even formulate the thought, I don't have time to work this weekend, you feel the intrusion physically.
It is a sudden, sharp tightness in your chest. It is a cold knot forming in your stomach. It is your jaw clenching, or a sudden, heavy wave of exhaustion watching over you.
It's a spike of cortisol and adrenaline.
Exactly. That physical sensation is your biological alarm system firing off. Your only job in the discover phase is to stop ignoring the alarm.
For years, your habit has been to push past that stomach knot with a fake smile.
Now, when you feel that knot as your boss makes the demand, you must mentally pause. You internally acknowledge, my physical alarm is sounding. A limit is currently being tested. I am feeling threatened.
So step 1 is just radical awareness. Don't push past the knot. Listen to it. Okay, the boss is still standing there waiting for an answer. Step 2 is release.
Step 2. Release is where the heavy lifting happens. In that exact moment, while you are taking a breath, you must actively mentally release the heavy baggage of your childhood blueprint.
You feel the panic rising, the deep-seated fear of authority, the terror of getting a bad grade or being scolded.
You have to actively acknowledge to yourself, my heart is racing because I am reacting right now like the frightened 8-year-old who is terrified of an angry parent.
Yeah.
But I'm not an 8-year-old child anymore. I am a competent adult professional. I have agency. I cannot be destroyed by a disappointed look.
You intentionally release the old historical pattern and you consciously step forward into your grounded adult self.
I am not the frightened kid. I am the bouncer at the velvet rope of my own weekend.
And then we move to step 3, respond.
Step 3, respond. Now that you are anchored in your adult self, you choose a proactive response based on your values, rather than a reactive, blurted response based on survival fear.
A reactive response is blurting out, sure, I'll get it done, while your stomach churns.
A proactive response could be buying time. I need to check my current project bandwidth and get back to you in 10 minutes. Or, if you're ready to hold the limit, it is a clear, professional statement of reality. I've prioritized the Johnson account for the remainder of the day, as we agreed. I won't be able to take on the data report this weekend, but I can jump into it first thing Monday morning.
It sounds so clean, so rational, and so simple when we discuss it here. But I have to challenge the practicality of this because the real world is full of people who absolutely do not accept a polite, clear, professional no.
That is very true.
What happens when we encounter the boundary destroyers? I'm talking about the highly manipulative individuals, the toxic family members, the overbearing bosses who completely ignore your clear limit, view it as an insult, and try to bulldoze right over it.
It is a vital and necessary distinction made in the psychological texts. When you use the discover, release, respond framework with normal, relatively healthy people, a simple, clear limit works perfectly. They might be briefly disappointed or inconvenienced, but they possess the emotional maturity to respect your autonomy.
Boundary destroyers, however, operate in a completely different reality.
Yes. With highly manipulative individuals, you will experience what psychologists call an extinction burst. When you stop providing the compliance they are addicted to, their behavior will temporarily escalate.
Their sudden rage, their calculated charm, their intense guilt trips, playing the victim.
These are not genuine emotional reactions. These are calculated, weaponized strategies designed specifically to break your resolve and force you to drop your limit.
They are essentially trying to hack your childhood blueprint. They are looking for the exact emotional button to push that will trigger your fear of abandonment.
That is exactly what they are doing. And the text emphasizes a very hard, very cold truth for this specific situation. You are entirely responsible for your actions and for maintaining your limits. You are absolutely not responsible for fixing, managing, or soothing their dysfunctional, out-of-control reactions.
If a boundary destroyer throws a spectacular emotional tantrum because you politely said no, that tantrum is their psychological issue to manage.
It is not a sign that your limit was wrong, and it is certainly not a signal that you need to change your no back to a yes to calm them down. You must hold the line, observe their reaction neutrally as a manipulation tactic, and refuse to absorb their emotional chaos.
Which is incredibly hard to do because our nervous systems are literally wired to absorb the chaos and try to neutralize it. And that leads to a phenomenon discussed in the text, which I found to be the most validating, relieving part of this entire analysis, the emotional hangover.
The emotional hangover is the crucible where real change happens.
Let's say you execute the framework perfectly. You discover, you release, you respond, you look the toxic friend or the overbearing boss in the eye and say, "No, I cannot do this for you." And you hold the line. You walk away. Logically, you should feel victorious, right? You should hear triumphant music playing in your head.
But instead, you feel physically sick to your stomach. You feel an overwhelming, crushing, agonizing wave of guilt.
You sit in your car and think, "I'm a monster. I am a terrible, selfish person. I should have just helped them. It would have been easier."
That intense emotional hangover is biologically inevitable when you first begin this work. But what is absolutely crucial here, what you must burn into your memory, is that the massive guilt you feel right after setting a new limit is not a moral warning sign.
It does not mean you did something wrong.
No, it is simply the biochemical echo of an old habit. It is your brain's outdated software panicking, experiencing literal withdrawal symptoms because you did not run the usual deeply ingrained people-pleasing program that usually rewards the brain with a hit of dopamine for avoiding conflict.
It's withdrawal from the addiction to keeping the peace.
It is exactly that. If you can anticipate that hangover, if you can expect the guilt to arrive, you take away its power. You can sit with that immense guilt in your lap, just like the two hands exercise. You let it burn, you let your mind tell you that you are a terrible person, and you just observe it without acting on it.
You don't pick up the phone to apologize.
Exactly. If you can endure that hangover, the biochemical wave will eventually fade. The brain will learn a new neural pathway. And what replaces that agonizing guilt, eventually, is a profound, unshakable sense of self-respect.
The guilt isn't a sign of failure. It's the growing pains of a completely new operating system coming online.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
This has been an incredibly profound exploration of human behavior. To bring this all the way back to where we started, back to that Friday night on the couch, staring at the text message, asking for a massive, unreasonable favor. The deep confusion we felt about why we constantly exhaust ourselves for others is finally clear. We were never really running towards those people out of a pure desire to help.
We were running away from our own shadows. We were running away from our own internal discomfort, our evolutionary fear of rejection, our guilt, and our deeply ingrained childhood terror of not being perceived as nice or compliant.
We traded our authenticity for the illusion of safety. And the most profound realization to take away from these clinical texts is that holding firm limits, putting up that velvet rope, and acting as a strict bouncer isn't actually about building walls to keep people out. It is the exact opposite.
It's about defining yourself so clearly and protecting your internal energy so fiercely that genuine, authentic connection with other human beings is finally possible.
When you have no limits, you are fundamentally unknowable. You offer people a counterfeit, resentful, shape-shifting, people-pleasing version of yourself. When you endure the discomfort and hold your limits, you finally give the world the real you.
You stop managing their emotions, you step off the eggshells, and you start participating in a real, honest relationship.
I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this exploration into the mechanics of the human mind. We've mapped the terrain from the evolutionary trap of experiential avoidance to the childhood architecture of our limits, right down to the tactical, everyday execution of discovering, releasing, and responding to demands.
It is challenging, lifelong work to rewrite your own biology, but it is the only reliable path to truly living well.
Before you go, I want you to consider this final thought. The next time your phone buzzes with an unreasonable request, the next time you feel that heavy, familiar, cold knot of guilt forming in your stomach when you are just about to advocate for yourself and say no, what if you didn't view that knot as a flashing red warning sign that you were doing something bad? What if instead you viewed that physical discomfort as the growing pains of your true potential finally stretching its legs? What could you achieve in your life? What kind of profound peace could you build if you simply let that guilt sit quietly in your lap while you went ahead and changed your life anyway?